office are going to ask you, can I help you? And that's what we demand, customer service at our office, and it's been just a huge hit with the public, and that's how we develop those partnerships. Getting back to those two databases, however, where the sheriffs are together, and I think pretty much all the sheriffs, at least in the 87 in Minnesota, and I'm assuming most of the 3,000 throughout the United States, of all the states that have counties, and I think all but 2 or 3 do, we are concerned with some of the data that for some reason is not in the database. Either the criminal history database, either it wasn't sent to the state, or it didn't get put in, or some sentencing guideline that the courts did. We don't know what it is, but we know that some of the information in there is just missing. So all I have to rely on is a lot of the people I don't know. I have no idea what their histories are. They might have just moved to Wright County, and they come in, being they live here, they have to come to the sheriff's office in Wright County where they live if they want a permit to carry, and many do. So they come in, they fill out the 2-page form, put their $100 down, give a copy of their driver's license. They have to do it in person, and then the fellow that works with me runs a check. We have 30 days to get that back to them, and I can assure you we get them done before that. We just had a 30-day turnaround recently, and some of you in here, your heads are nodding, you know that's true. And we do that. Again, law-abiding folks, we don't want to encumber you with waiting. You might have a gun you want to purchase, and you can't get it because your permit expired and you need it. So we try to work with people that way. That NICS background check that they do at the various firearms dealers, a lot of missing information in there too. It's each state, it's voluntary to put things in there. Now that's where the mental health commitments are. If somebody's struggling with mental illness, has a mental health issue, and they get committed by a court, maybe to St. Peter, Moose Lake, wherever it is, we should be able to get that information. Well, if that information is not in that NICS system, or the BCA may have it in their criminal history database, and I can't get to it, I could certainly sign a permit for somebody that we don't think has any business having it, and I think most people would agree. Most of the mass shootings that have happened throughout the nation, and there tends to be more and more of them, I'm not sure why. Most of them don't involve the assault rifle type. One in Sandy Hook obviously did. But the common denominator tends to be mental illness. Rich Stanek, my partner down in Hennepin County, brought a proposal to the Minnesota Sheriff's Association. We had a news conference probably 3 weeks ago Wednesday, or 2 weeks ago Wednesday, down at the Senate office building in St. Paul. And that's what we talked about. None of the sheriffs talked about restricting certain firearms, certain magazine capacities. The one I carry has 15 plus one in the chamber. It's pretty common to have those number of rounds, but the sheriffs aren't talking specific firearms. They are not talking capacity for magazines. They're talking databases, making sure what we have gives us the tools we need to deny a permit if we need to deny a permit. And that is basically where the sheriff's stance is on it. That's my stance on it. I am committed to public safety in Wright County. I'm fully aware of what's going on throughout the nation and other places, but my responsibility is here, and that's where I'm at with it. Any questions so far? I hear there's a meeting tonight down at the Capitol too. Yeah, I talked to one fellow who was heading down. Go ahead.
Do you think the role of a sheriff has been changing in the last number of years? I mean, because we see some activists, like maybe in Pine County, that say that they're not going to enforce any kind of executive order. Do you think that, and especially like down in Arizona, you see Sheriff Joe Arpaio taking his own stances on things. Do you see that happening here? If our constitutional rights across the board are, maybe subverted by socialist or communist intervention?
There's another Sheriff Joe?
There's
only one. And we follow him. We don't. I don't have inmates wearing pink underwear. And in Minnesota, I'd probably be in trouble if I had them living in tents. He's got some other issues there. The immigration issue is huge there, much more than it is in Wright County. He's right along the border, of course. But that's a good question. I think there's some sheriffs that I don't know what happened. I researched most of these people just to see what happened. Was there something that was a split? We consider ourselves in Minnesota fairly mainstream. We're all, we may not be members of the official Oath Keeper group that stemmed probably about in 2009 when a lot of groups have. But, as far as the amendments go to the U.S. Constitution, yeah, I've sent out my election certificate at least 3 times since the 14th of December. People wanting to know, did you take an oath to uphold the Second Amendment? I said, yeah, I took an oath to uphold the Constitution of the United States and the state of Minnesota, and I take it seriously. I also understand that the Supreme Court, the 3 branches of government here, it's supposed to be our checks and balance, that they will interpret these in times of turmoil when there's 2 different ways to look at certain amendments. The Second Amendment, pretty clear, right to bear arms. And we take that serious. We also work with the Fourth Amendment, probably more so than any of them, to be secure in your own persons, in your home, search and seizure. We'll get maybe city officials or neighbors saying, hey, they're growing dope in the house, kick the door in and go get it. And it's like, I'm going to need a little more than that. And I do. I go in, boom, we'll be sued like right now. So there's rules, and the rules are good if to restrict me from abusing power. And we are all for that. My predecessors were that way. Gary Miller, when I was a night sergeant, I worked 20 years. I love working the meth, the drugs. That was my deal, because if I can get a meth dealer or user off the street, I can help the user, because they're not much different than I. They they made a wrong turn someplace, and all of a sudden that drug got them and just sucked them in. They were stealing from their families. Families would maybe think we were the devil, that, geez, you're picking on my kid all the time. Then the family got sick of them, stealing from them, writing checks on their accounts, and next thing it's like, hey, you got to help us. And it's like, yep, and sometimes it's tough love, and that's with anybody with a substance abuse. Giving them a break sometimes isn't the way to go, and we know that that's quite the root of evil with some of those. But the search and seizure, the laws are in place to protect citizens, and we are all for that. We have the media here today, First Amendment. We have freedom of the press and freedom of free speech. You think I like holding this thing for KRWC? Of course I do. But I hope that answers your question somewhat. I've been getting that question a lot, and I give it an honest answer. Yeah.
Yeah. On the same question, isn't it true that within your county, you're the ultimate law enforcement authority?
Everywhere but at home.
That includes the feds or whatever in your county.
Right. The sheriff is considered the chief law enforcement officer of the county. You might have a county attorney that may want to argue that with you a little bit. You had a question, sir?
Do you feel that the people that are getting these concealed carry permits are proficient enough to handle guns safely? I get a little bit concerned. There's a lot of people, it's the first time they've ever shot a gun, and they really don't know how to handle them. I'd be terrible handling a golf club, for instance, But I get concerned that they could have an accident,
Then I go back to our audit every year. Have we had any, crimes? One, you can have an accident without having a crime. We did have one permit holder, probably 2 years ago, was in an establishment in the county here, and I don't know how he was carrying his gun. It was a smaller handgun, and I don't know what type of a holster it had, but when he left, it was sitting in a booth. And that's an oops, you bet, that's an oops. So, I'm not 100% sure what we did with that. I know I had a conversation. I think I called the person in, and it was in a city that has their own police department, so we weren't the primary responders. But because I issued the permit, we can revoke the permit, and sometimes you might do that for a year. Was there any intent at all Absolutely not. We had a cop years ago. I've been working with the sheriff's office since 1985, and years ago we had a cop come into the old sheriff's office, and the gun was missing. The holster was there, and you know, we asked the deputy, "Are you missing something?" "I don't think so." You know, and everything, and it's like, shoot, left the gun in the bathroom. At a city hall that was locked, no access to the public. Yes, sir.
First of all, thanks for your service to our county.
Thank you.
Question for you, very similar to the first gentleman's question, just a little more pointed, and bear with me, I'll give you just 15 seconds of background here. There's an organization that Richard Mack, a former sheriff in Arizona, runs called, I think it's called CISPA, Constitutional Sheriffs and Peace Officers Association. Basically, they stand for, they assist and help sheriffs that are currently in service to stand for their constitutional rights and the constitutional rights of their citizens. They meet semi-annually, and several of those sheriffs have made statements, and have actually been through this, where federal agents or the federal government has tried to violate citizens' rights, be it the Fourth Amendment, the Second Amendment, the First Amendment, and they've had conflicts with those agents where they've had to tell them, you need to leave our county, you can't do this, this is unconstitutional. Should it ever get to that, be it small, something like one home, the Fourth Amendment, something big like magazine capacity and infringing on the Second Amendment, if that was to happen here in our county, what would be your response if federal agents came in to enforce those laws?
Mike, you might want to move from that door here. That's a good question. I mentioned Sheriff Mack earlier, and that is the Constitutional Sheriff's Organization, and they meet yearly. They have a national conference. Last year they had it out in Las Vegas, Nevada, and I don't have any specific data on blocking federal agents, you know, access to a county. We have in Wright County, again, just in Wright County, I have a real good relationship with our federal partners. We have a heroin issue in Wright County. I never thought we did up until a year ago. Heroin was big in the 70s when I and Joe were growing up, and you only knew a few people that had it. It was a devastating drug. We took 2 pounds of heroin off somebody recently with the DEA, the Drug Enforcement Administration, and we'll work as partners with them. I'm one of 2 counties that has a nuclear power plant. With that comes some daunting responsibilities. With the safeguards agreement, I'm the primary response should something happen there. Of course, they have a large contingent of security there too. I can't tell you how many, but it works pretty good. So I work with the the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, and we're up there on training and whatnot with them. The FBI is the holder of our data. They keep all the Part 1, Part 2 crimes. But with the constitutional sheriffs, I don't know if we have any in Minnesota, but some of the issues, a lot of those sheriffs were from the southern states and out west, Utah. I think Mac was up in Utah for a while too. But
Pine County here.
well, and I don't know if the Pine County Sheriff is actually a member or not. That's Sheriff Robin Coles. He's new like me to being a sheriff. I've only been a sheriff for 2 years, so bear with me. I am still learning, believe me. And I like learning about it. But I think he had sent a letter, and I've never met the man. I just read what everybody read in the paper. And I think he had sent a letter to his permit to carry holders. I may be wrong. Just mentioning something about if any federal legislation is passed. Number one, we rarely enforce federal legislation. Usually federal officers do that. Federal courts are down in Minneapolis, St. Paul. I don't know if there's one in Duluth, but even our county attorney probably wouldn't have much jurisdiction there. And other than drugs and maybe some finance type things that the federal government would get in, we don't have them here a lot for those type of things. But I don't know if that sheriff is actually a member. Most of it's down south, and it is out west.
And I guess I didn't mean that to be a red herring to bring up that organization, but in the event that would ever take place in our county, in any way, shape, or form with any of the amendments,